Today is my mom's birthday, and so I volunteered to make the cake for her birthday dinner, and I'm gonna make this chocolate buttermilk cake out of the Claire Saffitz Dessert Person cookbook. I've made this once before, and it is just the most delicious and incredible chocolate cake. I'm super excited to make it again. My oven is preheating to 350, and I prepped my pan, so we have three 8-inch pans that are buttered, parchment paper, and then buttered again with flour. And now we're just gonna start getting all of our dry ingredients together, starting with 300 grams of all-purpose flour. Now we're adding 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of Diamond Kosher crystal salt. And when it calls for Diamond Kosher, this salt is less salty than a lot of other ones, so you can use a bit more. So if you're not using Diamond Kosher, use maybe like 1.5 teaspoons. Half a teaspoon of baking soda. We're just gonna whisk this and set it aside. Next up, we're getting together our chocolate mixture. What are we looking for? So I'm starting off with 6 ounces of semi-sweet baking chocolates, adding 5.5 ounces of coffee, and finally 41 grams of a Dutch processed cocoa powder. I've got a pot with about 1 inch of water in it simmering back there, so I'm gonna take our chocolate mixture over and just whisk this until everything's all nice and combined and melted. So now that we've got our delicious chocolate mixture, we're gonna set this one aside. Now we're gonna do our butter and sugar, starting by adding 170 grams of room temperature unsalted butter, which is 1.5 sticks, 200 grams of granulated sugar, and 200 grams of brown sugar as well. Finally, we're gonna add 57 grams of a neutral oil. And now it's time to bring in our food mixer. I'm gonna use the paddle attachment. I'm just gonna cream this all together until it's all nice and fluffy and combined, scraping the sides as needed. I just realized I missed a step. Our chocolate mixture. This is 160 grams of buttermilk that's been at room temperature. We're gonna whisk that in. I was reading the recipe and I was like, when does the buttermilk come into play? Oh, I was already supposed to do that. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Okay. Now back to our sugar. Now it's time for our eggs. I have 3 eggs that have been sitting out at room temperature for a couple hours, and we're gonna just mix them thoroughly between each one. So now on a low speed, we're gonna alternate combining our dry and our wet chocolate ingredients. So we're gonna add about 1/3 of the flour in and then mix until it's just incorporated. Now we're gonna add in half of the chocolate mixture and just keep repeating until it's all gone. Now we're gonna fill up each one of these cake pans with about 510 grams of our cake batter. Oh, running out of time on this video. Now into the oven at 350 for 30 to 40 minutes. So now it's time to get started on some frosting, and I'm gonna be making the silkiest chocolate buttercream recipe from the Claire Saffitz Dessert Person cookbook as well. I've never made this recipe, so I'm excited to challenge myself and give myself something new because I feel like I haven't baked something new in a while. So let's get into our silky smooth chocolate buttercream. The main thing in this recipe, and honestly with all recipes, read your recipe thoroughly before you get started so that you know what's gonna come next and you're not caught off guard, because you wanna have a couple of ingredients ready at the same time in this recipe. So reading that ahead of time and knowing that we're trying to line our timing up is gonna be helpful with moving forward. Already melted, and now I'm just getting my semi-sweet chocolate cooled here. I'm making a 1.5 times batch of this frosting because I like a lot of frosting on my cake. So this here is 12 ounces of unsweetened semi-sweet chocolate that I've melted and has been cooling for a couple of minutes here. I also have my eggs and egg yolks that have been getting at room temperature that are prepped and ready to go in their bowls. Now we're gonna get our sugar and water together for our sugar mixture and have that ready to go off on the side. 150 grams of sugar. I'm doing 1.5 times, so 225 grams. And then 43 grams of water, but I'm 1.5, so what's 1.5? 43 divided by 2 is 21.5, so 64.5 grams. All right, now I'm just gonna set this aside, and we are going to get to beating our eggs. So into my mixer, I'm gonna put 3 whole eggs plus 3 egg yolks. And I'm gonna mix this just until the eggs are broken up and incorporated. I'm gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of some Diamond Kosher salt to the eggs, and I'm gonna get it whisking on a high speed until it creates a nice fluffy, really light yellow sort of a color, and it can create a slowly dissolving ribbon. So this will take probably about 5 minutes. And while that's going, I'm gonna get over onto the oven and deal with our sugar. So for the sugar over there, I'm gonna use my candy thermometer until it hits 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're gonna lower it down and swirl it around until it gets up to 238 Fahrenheit. That's when we're gonna come back and we're gonna combine the sugar and the eggs. So hopefully we get those finished right at the same time. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated and difficult, especially doing a recipe for the first time and trying to film it. But we're in this together and I believe in us. Sugar just hit temperature, so I'm gonna put this back up over medium high, and then we're gonna stream our sugar into our egg mixture until it's fully cooled to the outside of the bowl. So we're gonna let it go until it completely cools down. So right now when I'm touching the outside of the bowl here, it's definitely warm to the touch, so we're gonna let this go. Like 5 to 8 minutes until it's cool when I touch the outside of the bowl and it's not hot from that sugar. My bowl is room temperature, feeling cool to the touch, so we're gonna stop it, and now we're gonna start adding in our butter. I have had 12 ounces of butter here, cut up, sitting at room temperature. I really wanna make sure it is so that it incorporates properly and it doesn't curdle or melt. We need to have our temperatures right. So I'm gonna slowly start incorporating these butter piece by piece into our frosting here until I have it all the way incorporated. That wound up being much more of a process than I thought it would to get it to this point. Mine ended up looking very curdled for a little bit. I think my temperatures weren't quite right. And the recipe says just keep going, just trust it, just keep going, it'll come back together. And I very much was not trusting it. And it came back together. She's looking gorgeous now. So I'm gonna go ahead and add our melted and cooled chocolate into the frosting. And finally, we're gonna add our vanilla, about 3 teaspoons. So I'm just putting a tablespoon, close enough. I also love a lot of vanilla. Now we're gonna get this mixed until it's all incorporated and there's no streaks of chocolate left. I think our frosting's done. Moment of truth. That is gorgeous. Oh, that's delicious. That is fluffy and delicious and like not too sweet. All right, it's time for me to get in the shower, and when I'm done, we'll come back and assemble our cake. Our cakes have fully cooled in their pans and we have our frosting ready. So it's time to assemble our cakes. I absolutely do not trust myself to do this without an apron. Belly's getting in the way of everything. Just gonna give it a quick leveling. Ooh, that's tasty. Everyone okay over there?
I got the black one. Yeah.
Our crumb coat is on, so this is gonna go into the fridge to set for 15-20 minutes, and then we'll do our final frosting. I didn't realize that I wasn't recording when I did the final frosting, and so my plan was to show you guys the finished cake when we get to my parents' house. This is the cake that's coming to my parents' house. We got cut off on the freeway and I had to slam on my brakes, and now the cake is in the foot of my passenger seat. There she is in all her beautiful glory. Oh, our cake is semi-salvaged. It ended up sliding and we ended up saving it. And this is my mom, so happy birthday, Kathy!
Happy birthday,
Woo!
Kathy!
Let's light our candle.
Aww, thank you.
And this is what we get. It'll still taste good, even though it looks not so great.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
perfect. Oh, thank you, honey.